The moment Cade Brennan saw the woman kneeling in the dust behind the general store, surrounded by 6 mangy dogs and 3 scrawny cats, he felt something shift in his chest that had nothing to do with the late afternoon sun beating down on Cimarron, New Mexico territory. It was September of 1883, and Cade had been drifting for the better part of 3 years, ever since his family's ranch in Texas had been foreclosed by the bank. He had watched his father age 10 years in a single afternoon, had held his mother while she wept, and then he had packed his bedroll and left, unable to bear the weight of their disappointment. The work was steady enough for a man who knew his way around horses and cattle, but the loneliness had become a constant companion, as familiar as the worn leather of his saddle. He had stopped in Cimarron only to resupply, before heading north toward Colorado, where he had heard there was work on the railroad. But now, watching this woman tear strips from what looked like her own dinner and distribute them carefully among the animals, he found himself rooted to the spot, his hand still on the hitching post where he had been about to tie his mare. She was young, probably not much past 20, with dark blonde hair that had come loose from its pins and hung in waves down her back. Her dress was simple calico, faded blue with small white flowers, and it was dusty at the hem and knees. She spoke softly to each animal as she fed them, her voice too low for Cade to make out the words, but the gentle cadence carried across the narrow alley. One of the dogs, a 3-legged mutt with patches of fur missing, growled at another that came too close to the food. The woman immediately placed herself between them, her hands outstretched but not threatening. "Now, Benjamin, there is plenty for everyone," she said, her voice clearer now. "You do not need to guard it so fiercely. Look, I have saved this piece especially for you." She held out a generous portion of what looked like cornbread, and the 3-legged dog took it gently from her fingers before limping a few feet away to eat in peace. The woman smiled, and Cade felt that strange shifting sensation again, stronger this time. "That is a lot of mouths to feed," he heard himself say, and immediately regretted speaking when she startled, turning quickly to look at him. Her eyes were green, he noted, a deep forest green that reminded him of the hill country back home. "They are hungry," she said simply, as if that explained everything. Then she turned back to the animals, distributing the last of her food before standing and brushing the dust from her skirt. The animals did not scatter when she rose, which told Cade she had been doing this for some time. "You make a habit of giving away your supper?" he asked, moving closer but staying a respectful distance away. His mare, Juniper, followed behind him, her reins loose in his hand. The woman looked at him properly now, her gaze direct and unafraid despite the wariness in her posture. "I make a habit of not letting creatures starve when I have the means to help them," she said. "Is there something you need, sir?" "Name is Cade Brennan," he said, touching the brim of his hat. "I am just passing through, heading up to Colorado for work." "I could not help but notice your kindness to these animals. Not many people would bother." "Then not many people have much kindness in them," she replied. Her tone was not harsh, merely matter-of-fact, as if she had long ago accepted this truth about the world. "My name is Penelope Kendrick. Most people call me Penny." "Miss Kendrick," Cade acknowledged. "Or is it Mrs.?" "Miss," she said, and something flickered across her face too quickly for him to read. "I run the boarding house on Main Street with my aunt. We have rooms if you are looking for a place to stay the night before you move on." Cade had been planning to camp outside of town to save money, but he found himself nodding. "That would be appreciated. Let me tend to my horse and I will come by directly." Penny nodded and turned to leave, but one of the cats, a skinny orange tabby, wound itself around her ankles and mewed pitifully. She bent down and scooped it up, cradling it against her chest despite the dirt on its fur. "You are a manipulative little creature," she murmured to it, but her tone was affectionate. "Very well, you may come home with me tonight, but if Aunt Martha complains, I am blaming you entirely." She glanced back at Cade, and for the first time, he saw a hint of a smile on her lips. The boarding house is the 2-story building with the blue shutters. You cannot miss it. Supper is at 6 o'clock sharp. Then she was gone, disappearing around the corner of the general store with the cat still clutched in her arms. Cade stood there for a long moment, watching the empty space where she had been, while the remaining dogs and cats finished their meal around his boots. "Well, Juniper," he said to his mare, "I suppose we are staying in Cimarron tonight after all." The boarding house was easy to find, just as Penny had said. It was a well-maintained building that stood out among the rougher establishments on Main Street. The blue shutters were freshly painted, and there were flower boxes in the windows, though the late summer heat had left the blooms looking somewhat wilted. Cade tied Juniper to the rail out front and grabbed his saddlebags before climbing the steps to the front porch. The door opened before he could knock, and he found himself face to face with a woman who could only be Penny's aunt. She was perhaps 50, with gray streaking through her dark hair and sharp blue eyes that assessed him in a single glance. "You must be the cowboy Penny mentioned," she said without preamble. "I am Martha Kendrick. Room is $2 a night, including supper and breakfast. No drinking, no gambling, and no entertaining women in your room. House rules." "Yes, madam," Cade said, reaching into his pocket for the money. "I am only staying the one night, then heading north." Martha took the coins and stepped aside to let him enter. The interior of the boarding house was clean and simply furnished, with dark wood floors and whitewashed walls. A staircase led to the second floor, and Cade could smell something cooking that made his stomach rumble despite himself. "You are in room 4, top of the stairs and to the left," Martha said, handing him a key. "Wash basin and pitcher are in your room. Outhouse is out back. Supper is in 20 minutes, so do not dawdle." "Thank you, madam," Cade said, then hesitated. "Miss Kendrick, your niece, she seemed to care a great deal about those animals behind the general store." Martha's expression softened slightly. "Penny has always had a tender heart for strays and lost things. She was like that even as a child. Her parents passed from fever when she was 16, and she came to live with me here in Cimarron. That was 4 years ago now. She has been feeding those animals for nearly as long. Spends half her egg money on scraps from the butcher and day-old bread from the bakery." Something in the older woman's tone suggested both pride and exasperation. Cade nodded slowly, filing away this information even as he told himself it did not matter, that he would be gone by morning. "She seems like a fine woman," he said carefully. "She is," Martha agreed. "And she deserves better than this dusty town can offer her, but she will not leave, says the animals need her and that I am getting too old to run this place alone." She fixed Cade with a stern look. "I am telling you this because you are looking at her the way men do when they are getting ideas, and I will not have her heart broken by another drifter who makes promises he has no intention of keeping." Cade felt heat rise in his face. "I am not the kind of man who makes promises lightly, madam. And I am not planning to make any promises at all. Like I said, I am heading north in the morning." "Good," Martha said, though her expression suggested she did not entirely believe him. "Now go wash up. Supper will be on the table soon, and I do not tolerate lateness." Room 4 was small but comfortable, with a narrow bed covered in a faded quilt, a simple dresser, and a washstand with a porcelain basin. Cade set his saddlebags on the floor and poured water from the pitcher, scrubbing the trail dust from his face and hands. He changed into his spare shirt, the one without any tears or stains, and ran his fingers through his dark hair in a futile attempt to make himself more presentable. He caught himself in the small mirror above the dresser and stopped, frowning at his reflection. What was he doing, making himself look nice for supper at a boarding house? Martha was right to warn him off. He had nothing to offer a woman like Penny Kendrick. No home, no steady work, nothing but a horse and whatever wages he could earn moving from place to place. But when he made his way downstairs and saw her setting the table in the dining room, all those sensible thoughts scattered like leaves in the wind. She had changed her dress and fixed her hair, which was now pinned up neatly, though a few stubborn strands had already escaped to curl around her face. The orange cat from earlier was sitting on the windowsill, watching her with yellow eyes. "Good evening, Mr. Brennan," she said, glancing up as he entered. "I hope you found your room satisfactory." "More than satisfactory, Miss Kendrick," he replied, "and please call me Cade." She smiled, and he noticed she had a small dimple in her left cheek. "Then you must call me Penny. We do not stand much on formality here, despite my aunt's stern demeanor." "I heard that," Martha called from the kitchen, and Penny's smile widened. "She hears everything," Penny said in a conspiratorial whisper. "I am convinced she has supernatural abilities." Before Cade could respond, the front door opened, and 3 more boarders filed in. An older gentleman with mutton-chop whiskers who introduced himself as Harold Pierce, a traveling salesman. A young married couple named the Daltons who were heading west to California, and a rail-thin man in his 30s called Samuel Worth, who worked as a clerk at the land office. They all took their seats around the table, and Martha emerged from the kitchen carrying a large pot of stew that filled the room with a rich, savory aroma. Penny followed with a basket of fresh bread and a crock of butter. The conversation during the meal was pleasant and unremarkable, the kind of easy talk that happened among strangers sharing a table. Harold told stories about his travels selling patent medicines, some of which were obviously exaggerated but entertaining nonetheless. The Daltons spoke of their hopes for finding good land in California, their young faces bright with optimism. Samuel said little, focusing intently on his food. Cade found himself mostly listening, his attention drawn again and again to Penny as she moved around the table, refilling glasses and making sure everyone had enough to eat. She had an easy way about her, a natural warmth that made each person feel attended to without being fussed over. "So, Mr. Brennan," Harold said, waving his fork for emphasis, "what takes you north to Colorado?" "Mining, railroad work." "Railroad, most likely," Cade replied. "I have experience with horses and heavy labor, and I heard they are hiring." "Dangerous work that," Harold observed. "My cousin worked on the railroad through Wyoming, lost 3 fingers to a coupling accident." "Harold, please," Mrs. Dalton said, looking a bit pale. "Not at the dinner table." "My apologies, dear lady," Harold said, not looking particularly apologetic, "but it is the truth of it. The railroad companies work men to death and pay them barely enough to live on." "It is steady work," Cade said, hearing the defensive note in his own voice. "And a man has to make a living somehow." Of course," Harold agreed. "I meant no offense. These are hard times for working men. The rich get richer while the rest of us scramble for scraps." "That is enough political talk," Martha said firmly. "Penny, bring out the pie." Penny had made apple pie, and it was excellent, the crust flaky and the filling perfectly spiced with cinnamon. Cade ate his portion slowly, trying to make it last, and when Penny offered him a second slice, he accepted without hesitation. "This is wonderful," he said sincerely. "Best pie I've had in years." Penny blushed slightly. "Thank you. The apples are from old Mr. Henderson's orchard just outside of town. He trades me a basket each week in exchange for mending and washing his linens." Penny does not believe in accepting charity, Martha said with a touch of pride. Everything must be earned or traded fairly. Nothing wrong with honest work, Cade said, and Penny met his eyes across the table, something unspoken passing between them. After supper, the boarders dispersed to their various evening activities. The Daltons retired to their room. Harold went out to the saloon despite Martha's house rules applying only to the premises itself, and Samuel disappeared upstairs with a book under his arm. Cade offered to help with the dishes, and though Martha initially protested, Penny accepted before her aunt could refuse. "You do not have to do this," Penny said as they carried plates into the kitchen. "You are a paying guest." "I know I do not have to," Cade replied. "But my mother raised me to be useful, and I have been doing for myself for long enough that I remember how to wash a dish properly." They fell into an easy rhythm, Penny washing while Cade dried and stacked. Martha had disappeared somewhere upstairs, leaving them alone in the warm kitchen with its smell of soap and lingering spices. "Tell me about the animals," Cade said after a few minutes of comfortable silence. "Your aunt mentioned you have been feeding them for years now." Penny's hands stilled in the soapy water. "It started with just one dog," she said quietly. "A little terrier that someone had dumped when they left town. She was starving, eating garbage from behind the restaurant, and I just could not stand it, so I started bringing her scraps. Then there were 2 dogs, then 3. The cats came later. Some of them are truly feral, but others were clearly pets once, before their owners abandoned them or died or just stopped caring. It must cost you a fair amount feeding them all," Cade observed. "I manage," Penny said. "I take in sewing and mending, help with laundry for some of the families in town, trade work for food when I can. And I do not eat as much as I probably should, but that is all right. I have never been very hungry anyway." Cade frowned. "You should not be starving yourself to feed strays, Penny." "That is not right." She turned to look at him, her green eyes flashing with sudden intensity. "What is not right is that people treat animals as if they are disposable things, useful only as long as they serve a purpose and worthy of abandonment the moment they become inconvenient. Those animals did not ask to be brought to this town and then left to die. They deserve kindness, the same as any living creature." "I am not arguing with you," Cade said gently. "I think what you are doing is admirable. I just worry that you are sacrificing too much of yourself in the process." Penny's expression softened. "I appreciate your concern, but you need not worry. I have been taking care of myself and those animals for quite some time now, and I am still here, still managing." "You are more than just managing," Cade said. "You are making a real difference to those animals. That 3-legged dog, the one you called Benjamin, he looked at you like you hung the moon." A small smile played at the corners of Penny's mouth. "Benjamin lost his leg in a trap about 6 months ago. The trapper who set it just left him there to die, said he was not worth the bullet to put him down. I found him and brought him to the veterinarian, Mr. Shaw. We managed to save him, though he lost the leg. He has been particularly devoted ever since." They finished the dishes in silence, but it was a peaceful quiet, the kind that happens when 2 people feel comfortable in each other's presence. When the last plate was dried and put away, Cade found himself reluctant to leave the kitchen, to go upstairs to his small room and spend the evening alone. "Would you like to sit on the porch for a while?" Penny asked, as if reading his thoughts. "It is still warm out, but there is usually a nice breeze in the evenings." "I would like that very much," Cade said. The porch was indeed pleasant, with 2 rocking chairs and a view of Main Street as it settled into evening quiet. Most of the businesses had closed for the night, though light and noise still spilled from the saloon down the street. They sat in the rocking chairs, moving gently back and forth, watching as the sky turned from gold to pink to deep purple. "Why are you really heading to Colorado?" Penny asked after a while. "I do not mean to pry, but you do not seem like a man running towards something. You seem more like someone running away." Cade was surprised by her perceptiveness. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to someone who has spent a lot of time watching people," Penny said. "When you work in a boarding house, you learn to read guests quickly. It helps to know who might cause trouble and who will pay their bills on time." "And which category do I fall into?" Cade asked with a slight smile. "Neither," Penny said. "You fall into the category of men who are lost but do not want to admit it, even to themselves." The accuracy of her observation stung, but not in an unpleasant way. It felt more like the pain of a wound finally being cleaned, the necessary hurt that comes before healing. "My family lost our ranch in Texas 3 years ago," Cade found himself saying. "Bank foreclosed after 2 bad years of drought and cattle disease. My father had put everything he had into that land, his whole life's work, and then it was just gone. I could not stay and watch them try to rebuild with nothing. So I left, told myself I would send money when I could, help them get back on their feet." "But you have not sent any money," Penny said softly. "It was not a question." "I have barely had enough to keep myself fed and clothed," Cade admitted. "The work is irregular, the pay is poor, and I spend more time traveling than actually earning. I tell myself that the next job will be better, that I will finally save enough to make a real difference. But it never happens. I am just drifting, same as these animals you feed, except I do not even have the sense to stay in one place." "You are not a stray animal, Cade," Penny said firmly. "You are a man who suffered a loss and did not know how to cope with it. There is no shame in that." "Feels like shame," Cade muttered. "Well, it should not," Penny replied. "You cannot save everyone and you cannot fix everything. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is just keep going, keep trying, even when it feels hopeless." "Is that what you do?" Cade asked. "Keep going even when it feels hopeless." Penny was quiet for a long moment, her rocking chair creaking steadily. "My parents died very suddenly," she finally said. "One day they were healthy and laughing at breakfast, and 2 weeks later they were both gone, taken by a fever that swept through our town in Kansas. I was 16, old enough to inherit the house but too young to really know what to do with myself. My Aunt Martha came and got me, brought me here to Cimarron to live with her." "That must have been very difficult," Cade said inadequately. "It was," Penny agreed. "For a long time I felt completely adrift, like nothing mattered anymore. Then I found that first dog, that little terrier I mentioned, and suddenly I had a purpose again. Something that needed me, that would suffer if I did not act, and that made all the difference." "So you saved yourself by saving them," Cade said, understanding. "I suppose I did," Penny said. "Though I had never thought of it quite that way before." They sat together until full dark had fallen, and the stars emerged bright and sharp in the New Mexico sky. Cade could not remember the last time he had felt this sense of peace, of rightness in just being present in a moment. It frightened him a little, how easily he could imagine staying here, sitting on this porch night after night, talking with Penny about everything and nothing. But he had told Martha the truth. He had nothing to offer. No home, no prospects, just a borrowed room and a horse that needed shoeing. A woman like Penny deserved stability, a man who could provide for her and not add to her burdens. "I should turn in," he said reluctantly, rising from the rocking chair. "I want to get an early start tomorrow." "Of course," Penny said, standing as well. "Thank you for helping with the dishes." "And for listening." "Thank you for the conversation," Cade replied. "It has been a long time since I talked with anyone about anything that mattered." They stood there for a moment, neither quite willing to end the evening before Penny finally smiled and reached out to briefly touch his arm. "Safe travels, Cade Brennan," she said. "I hope you find what you are looking for in Colorado." "I hope so too," Cade said, though even as he spoke the words, he felt a growing certainty that what he was looking for might not be in Colorado at all. He went upstairs to his room and lay on the narrow bed, staring at the ceiling and listening to the quiet sounds of the boarding house settling for the night. Sleep was a long time coming, and when it finally arrived, he dreamed of green eyes and stray animals and a woman who fed them both. Cade woke before dawn, as was his habit, and lay in bed watching the gray light gradually brighten beyond the window. He had slept poorly, his dreams troubled and fragmentary, and now he felt heavy and sluggish, as if his body was resisting the idea of leaving. He forced himself up, dressed quickly, and gathered his belongings. The house was still quiet as he made his way downstairs, his boots barely whispering against the wooden steps. He had planned to slip out without breakfast, to avoid any awkward goodbyes, but when he reached the ground floor he found Martha already up and moving in the kitchen. "Breakfast is not for another hour," she said without looking at him, "but I saved you some biscuits and bacon from last night. They are wrapped on the counter." "Thank you, madam," Cade said, genuinely touched. "I appreciate your hospitality." "You are welcome," Martha replied, finally turning to face him. "You are a good man, Cade Brennan, I can see that, but I meant what I said yesterday about Penny. She has had her heart broken before by a man who made promises he did not keep. I will not see it happen again." Cade nodded, accepting both the warning and the compliment. "I understand, madam, and I have no intention of breaking anyone's heart, least of all your niece's." "Intentions and actions are not always the same thing," Martha observed, "but I believe you mean well. Now take your breakfast and go before Penny wakes up and makes this harder than it needs to be." Cade picked up the wrapped bundle from the counter, surprised by its weight. Martha had packed him enough food for several meals, not just breakfast. He met her eyes and saw the kindness there beneath the stern exterior. "Thank you," he said again, putting real feeling into the words, "for everything." He slipped out the front door into the cool pre-dawn air, the bundle of food in one hand and his saddlebags slung over his shoulder. Juniper was waiting patiently at the hitching rail where he had left her the night before, and she nickered softly when she saw him. "Morning, girl," he murmured, running a hand down her neck. Ready to move on, the mare tossed her head as if in agreement, but Cade found himself hesitating with his hand on the saddle. Behind the boarding house, he could hear the faint sounds of animals stirring, the soft mews and whines of creatures waking hungry. He told himself to mount up and ride out. He had a long way to go, and the sooner he left, the better his chances of reaching Colorado before the first snows. But his feet seemed to have other ideas, carrying him around the side of the building toward the alley where he had first seen Penny the day before. The animals were there, the same ragged collection of dogs and cats, plus a few new ones he had not seen yesterday. They stirred when they saw him, some backing away nervously while others approached with cautious optimism, clearly hoping for food. Cade unwrapped Martha's bundle and found not just biscuits and bacon, but also cold chicken, bread ends, and what looked like the remains of last night's beef stew in a small jar. He smiled, realizing Martha had known exactly what he would do with the food. He distributed it carefully among the animals, remembering how Penny had done it, making sure the weaker ones got their share before the stronger could bully them away. The three-legged dog, Benjamin, limped over and took a piece of chicken directly from Cade's hand, his tail wagging slowly. "You are a lucky fellow," Cade told him. "You have someone who cares about you, who makes sure you are looked after. That is more than a lot of us can say. I wondered if you might be here." Cade turned to find Penny standing at the entrance to the alley, wrapped in a shawl against the morning chill. Her hair was loose around her shoulders, and her feet were bare beneath the hem of her nightgown and robe. She looked soft and sleepy and impossibly beautiful. "I am sorry," Cade said. "I did not mean to wake you." "You did not," Penny replied, moving closer. "I always wake early to feed them before I start the breakfast preparations. I just did not expect to find you here." "Your aunt packed me enough food to feed an army," Cade said. "I figured she would not have done that unless she suspected I might put it to good use." "She is more observant than people give her credit for," Penny said with a small smile. She knelt beside the orange cat from the night before and stroked its matted fur. "You were supposed to leave before I woke up, I think, to make it easier." "I was," Cade admitted, "but I am not very good at doing what I am supposed to do." "I am glad," Penny said quietly. "I did not like the idea of you leaving without saying goodbye." They fed the animals together in silence, working in the same easy rhythm they had found while washing dishes the night before. When the food was gone and the animals had dispersed to their various resting spots, Cade found himself with no more excuses to delay his departure. "I should go," he said, but he did not move. "Yes," Penny agreed. "You should." "I keep thinking," Cade continued slowly, "that maybe Colorado is not where I need to be. That maybe what I have been looking for is not work on the railroad or better wages or any of those practical things I have been telling myself I need." "What have you been looking for?" Penny asked, her green eyes steady on his face. "A reason to stop running," Cade said. "A place that feels like home, a purpose beyond just surviving day to day." "Those are big things to find," Penny said, "especially in one night in a small-town boarding house." "I know," Cade said. "And I know I have nothing to offer you. No home or steady work or even a plan beyond riding north and hoping for the best. But I also know that I have not felt like this in 3 years, maybe longer. Like I matter, like what I do or do not do might actually make a difference to someone." Penny stepped closer to him, close enough that he could smell the faint scent of lavender in her hair. "You do matter, Cade. What you do makes a difference, not just to me, but to these animals you just fed, to everyone whose life you touch. The question is not whether you matter, but whether you are brave enough to stay and build something instead of always moving on to the next place." "Is that what you want?" Cade asked, hardly daring to hope. "For me to stay?" "I want you to do what is right for you," Penny said carefully. "But yes, if you are asking whether I would welcome your presence in Cimarron, whether I would like the chance to know you better and see where this feeling between us might lead, then yes, I want you to stay." Cade felt something tight in his chest finally release, like a knot he had been carrying for years suddenly coming undone. "I do not have much money," he warned her. "Barely enough for another week at the boarding house, if that." "Then we will find you work," Penny said practically. "Cimarron is a growing town. There are always ranches looking for hands, freight companies needing drivers, businesses that need help. You are strong and capable, and you will find something." "Just like that?" Cade asked. "I tell you I want to stay and you start making plans." "Just like that," Penny confirmed. "Unless you have changed your mind in the last 30 seconds. "No," Cade said firmly. "I have not changed my mind. I am staying." The smile that broke across Penny's face was like the sun rising, bright and warm and full of promise. Without thinking, Cade reached out and pulled her into his arms, holding her close while she laughed against his chest. "Aunt Martha is going to have opinions about this," Penny said when they finally pulled apart. "Your aunt already knew this might happen," Cade replied. "She warned me about breaking your heart before I left yesterday. I think she was testing me, seeing what kind of man I really am." "And what kind of man are you?" Penny asked. "The kind who stays," Cade said. The kind who keeps his promises. The kind who is not afraid to build something worth having, even if it is hard. Those are all excellent qualities in a man, Penny said approvingly. Now come on, we need to get back before Aunt Martha sends out a search party. And you need to properly check out of your room and then check back in, because I am not having people say we are living in sin under her roof. Cade laughed, a genuine sound of joy that felt foreign in his throat after so long. Yes, madam, whatever you say. They walked back to the boarding house together as the sun broke over the horizon, painting the New Mexico sky in shades of gold and rose. Juniper was still waiting patiently, and Cade patted her neck as they passed. Looks like we are staying, girl, he told her. Better get used to this town, because I do not think we are leaving any time soon. The mayor whickered and butted his shoulder gently, as if in approval. Martha was waiting for them on the porch, her arms crossed and her expression unreadable. Cade braced himself for a lecture, but instead the older woman just shook her head and allowed herself a small smile. Well, she said, I suppose this was inevitable. Come in and have some real breakfast, both of you. And Cade, after you eat, you can take Juniper to the stable and then come back to discuss arrangements. If you are going to be courting my niece, you are going to do it properly, under my roof where I can keep an eye on you both. Yes, madam, Cade said, grinning. Thank you, madam. Do not thank me yet, Martha replied tartly. You have not seen how much work I am going to extract from you in exchange for room and board while you look for proper employment. But her eyes were kind as she held the door open for them, and Cade felt a rush of gratitude for this stern, generous woman who had taken in her orphaned niece, and was now extending the same kindness to a drifting cowboy with nothing to his name but a horse and a desire to finally stop running. The weeks that followed were some of the happiest Cade could remember. True to her word, Martha put him to work around the boarding house, and he found himself repairing loose steps, fixing leaky pipes, and helping with the endless labor of keeping the establishment running smoothly. In return, she gave him room 4 at a significantly reduced rate and made sure he was well fed. But the real payment, as far as Cade was concerned, was the time he got to spend with Penny. They fell into a routine, waking before dawn to feed the animals together, then working through the day at their various tasks before spending the evenings on the porch or taking walks through town. She showed him all her favorite places: the spot by the creek where wildflowers grew in spring, the old oak tree at the edge of town where she went to think, the little cemetery where her parents were not buried, but where she went anyway to talk to them. Cade found work after his first week in Cimarron, hired on at the Baker Ranch, 5 miles outside of town. The pay was decent, and the work was familiar, mostly breaking horses and repairing fence line. And the ranch foreman, a gruff older man named Tom Sawyer, took a liking to him after Cade successfully handled a particularly difficult stallion that had thrown 3 other hands. You have got a way with horses, Brennan, Tom observed, watching as Cade worked with the animal. Not trying to dominate them, just understanding them and letting them come to their own conclusions. My father taught me, Cade said. He always said that a horse that chooses to cooperate is worth 10 that are forced into it. Your father is a wise man, Tom said. Was, Cade corrected quietly. He passed 2 years ago. Heart gave out after the bank took our ranch. I am sorry to hear that, Tom said, and meant it. But he clearly taught you well before he went. You have got a standing job here as long as you want it. Cade worked 6 days a week at the Baker Ranch, sending half his wages to his mother in Texas and saving the rest. He wrote her a long letter explaining where he was and what he was doing, apologizing for the years of silence and promising to do better. Her response came 3 weeks later, full of relief and forgiveness and the news that she had remarried, to a kind widower who owned a small farm and treated her well. She did not need his money, she wrote, but she was grateful for it and proud of him for finally finding a place to call home. That letter lifted a weight from Cade's shoulders that he had not fully realized he was carrying. His mother was cared for, happy even, and he was free to build his own life without the constant gnawing guilt that had driven him for so long. As September turned to October and the air began to cool, Cade found himself falling deeper in love with Penny with each passing day. She was unlike anyone he had ever known, practical and idealistic in equal measure, capable of endless compassion for animals, but also possessing a shrewd understanding of human nature that sometimes surprised him. "You see the best in people," he observed one evening as they sat by the creek, watching the sunset paint the water gold, "even when they do not deserve it." "I see the potential in people," Penny corrected, "what they could be if they chose kindness over cruelty, but I am not naive, Cade. I know the world is full of people who will never choose kindness, who will always take the easy path even if it causes suffering. I just refuse to let those people define how I live my own life." "Is that why you never gave up on the animals?" Cade asked. "Because you saw the potential for kindness in yourself and refused to ignore it." "I suppose so," Penny said thoughtfully. "Though it was not quite so philosophical at the time. I just saw creatures suffering and had the means to help them. Everything else came after." "You are an extraordinary woman, Penny Kendrick," Cade said, taking her hand in his. "I am an ordinary woman doing what anyone should do," Penny replied, but she squeezed his hand and leaned her head against his shoulder, and Cade felt a contentment so profound it almost hurt. By November, Cade had saved enough money to consider buying a small piece of land on the outskirts of Cimarron. It was not much, just 5 acres with a creek running through it and a small cabin that needed significant repairs, but it was his, purchased outright with no debt to any bank. He took Penny to see it on a clear Sunday afternoon, nervous about her reaction. "It needs a lot of work," he said as they stood in front of the dilapidated cabin. "The roof leaks, half the floorboards are rotted through, and I am pretty sure there is a family of skunks living under the porch. But it has good bones, and with time I could make it into something livable. Maybe even nice." Penny walked around the property slowly, taking in the overgrown garden, the tilting fence, the barn that was missing one entire wall. When she finally spoke, her voice was thoughtful. "You could run some chickens here," she said. "Maybe a cow or two, a kitchen garden. There is enough land for a decent vegetable patch, and that creek means you would have reliable water year-round." "I was thinking I could build a shelter for your animals," Cade said carefully. "Something weatherproof where they could sleep at night with enough room for all of them. You could stop worrying about them freezing in the winter or getting hurt in storms." Penny turned to look at him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "You would do that? Build a shelter for stray animals on your property?" "They are your animals," Cade said. "Which makes them my animals too, or at least my responsibility to help care for. I know how much they mean to you, Penny. I would never ask you to choose between them and me." "I love you," Penny said suddenly, the words spilling out as if she could not contain them any longer. "I have been trying not to say it, trying to be practical and sensible and not rush things, but I love you, Cade Brennan. I love how you understand what matters to me, how you see me for who I am and do not try to change me. I love that you stayed when you could have left, that you chose this life even though it was harder than just drifting." Cade crossed the distance between them in 3 long strides and pulled her into his arms, kissing her with all the pent-up emotion he had been holding back for weeks. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, he pressed his forehead against hers. "I love you too," he said, I think I have loved you since that first day when I saw you feeding those animals, saw your kindness and your strength. I want to build a life with you, Penny. I want to fix up this cabin and make it into a home for both of us. I want to wake up every morning and feed animals with you, work hard all day knowing I am building something that matters, and then come home to you every night, if you will have me. Is that a proposal? Penny asked, pulling back slightly to look him in the eye. Not yet, Cade admitted. I do not have a ring, and I have not asked your aunt for permission, and I wanted to make sure the cabin was at least structurally sound before I asked you to share it with me. But yes, I intend to propose properly, as soon as I can do it right. I do not need a ring or a fancy proposal, Penny said. I just need you and your promise that we will face whatever comes together. You have that promise, Cade said solemnly. From now until forever, Penny, I am not going anywhere. They stood there in the shadow of the broken-down cabin, holding each other as the afternoon sun slanted through the bare branches overhead, and Cade felt a certainty settle into his bones. This was where he was meant to be with this woman, building this life. All the wandering, all the loneliness, all the years of drifting had led him here to this moment to her. We should tell Aunt Martha, Penny said eventually, before she hears about it from someone else. You know how fast gossip travels in this town. I suspect she already knows, Cade said. Your aunt seems to know everything before it happens. True, Penny agreed, but we should tell her anyway, and then we should start making plans. I am not a patient woman when it comes to things I want, and I want this. I want us. Then let us go tell her, Cade said, taking Penny's hand. And tomorrow, I will start working on the cabin every evening after I finish at the ranch. With luck and hard work, we could be married by spring. Spring, Penny repeated, as if testing the word. I like the sound of that. They walked back to town together, hand in hand, talking excitedly about their plans. Cade felt lighter than he had in years, as if the decision to commit fully to this life, to this woman, had released him from the burden of uncertainty that had dogged him for so long. Martha was waiting for them on the porch of the boarding house, as Cade had suspected she would be. She took one look at their joined hands and their flushed, happy faces and allowed herself a real smile, the kind that softened her stern features and revealed the kind woman beneath. I suppose congratulations are in order, she said. Though I do hope you had the sense to propose properly, Cade, and not just blurt it out in some field somewhere. Not quite yet, madam, Cade said respectfully, but soon. I wanted to tell you first, ask for your blessing since Penny has no father to speak for her. Martha's eyes grew suspiciously bright. That is very proper of you, and yes, you have my blessing for whatever an old woman's opinion is worth. You are a good man, Cade Brennan, and you make my niece happy. That is all I have ever wanted for her. Thank you, Aunt Martha, Penny said, stepping forward to embrace her. That means everything to me. Yes, well, Martha said gruffly, patting Penny's back. Do not think this means you two can start acting improperly. You will be married properly in the church, and until then I expect you both to behave with appropriate decorum. Yes, madam, Cade and Penny said in unison, then looked at each other and laughed. The months between November and the following March were filled with hard work and careful planning. Cade spent every spare moment working on the cabin, replacing the roof, repairing the floorboards, patching holes in the walls, and building a proper shelter for Penny's growing menagerie of animals. Tom at the Baker Ranch gave him occasional days off to focus on the house, and several of the other ranch hands volunteered their time on Sundays to help with the larger projects. You are one of us now, Brennan, Tom said when Cade tried to thank him for the help. We look after our own in Cimarron. Penny, meanwhile, was busy making the cabin into a home. She sewed curtains and quilts, traded her sewing services for furniture, and slowly but surely transformed the rough bachelor dwelling into something warm and welcoming. Martha contributed liberally from her own stores, providing dishes and cookware and linens, claiming she needed to clear out space anyway. The animals adapted to their new shelter with remarkable speed. Penny had worried they might be too feral to accept a permanent home, but within a week, they had all claimed their favorite sleeping spots and seemed to understand that this was their place now, where they would be fed and cared for regularly. The three-legged dog, Benjamin, appointed himself as the guardian of the property, patrolling the perimeter on his 3 legs and barking at any perceived threats. "He thinks he is protecting us," Penny said fondly, watching Benjamin chase off a raccoon that had gotten too close to the chicken coop. "He does not realize he could not actually stop anyone with bad intentions. He has stopped me more than once when I arrived earlier than expected," Cade said. "That dog has more courage in 3 legs than most men have in their whole bodies." As winter settled over New Mexico, bringing occasional snow and cold winds down from the mountains, Cade and Penny spent their evenings by the fire in the cabin, planning their future. They talked about the children they hoped to have, about expanding the animal shelter, about perhaps starting a small breeding program for horses that Cade could run alongside his ranch work. "I want at least 4 children," Penny said one evening, her feet tucked under her as she worked on a quilt square. 2 boys and 2 girls, all of them taught to be kind and strong and unafraid of hard work." "4 is a good number," Cade agreed. "Though we should probably get married first before we plan out their whole lives." "Details," Penny said dismissively, but she was smiling. "Have you given any more thought to when you want to have the ceremony?" "I was thinking the first week of March," Cade said. "The cabin will be completely finished by then, and the weather should be mild enough that traveling will not be too difficult for guests. Unless you want something bigger, we could wait until summer, have a larger celebration." "I do not want to wait," Penny said immediately. "March is perfect. Small and simple, just our friends and Aunt Martha and maybe a few of the ranch hands. I do not need a big ceremony, Cade. I just need you and a promise before God that we belong to each other." "Then March it is," Cade said, leaning over to kiss her temple. "I will talk to Reverend Walsh this Sunday about setting a date." The Reverend was happy to officiate, suggesting the first Saturday in March as an auspicious date. Cade still needed to find a ring, and he spent several weeks visiting the small jewelry shop in town whenever he had spare time, looking for something that felt right. He finally settled on a simple gold band with a small emerald set in it, the green stone reminding him of Penny's eyes. "You have chosen well," the jeweler, an old man named Mr. Foster, said approvingly. "That is a good stone, set in gold that will last a lifetime. Your bride will be pleased." Cade proposed on a cold February evening, kneeling in front of the fire in their cabin while Penny sat in the rocking chair he had repaired for her. It was not a grand gesture, no elaborate speech or orchestrated moment, just a simple question from a man to the woman he loved. "Penny Kendrick, will you marry me?" he asked, holding out the ring. "Will you share this cabin and this land and this life with me for as long as we both live?" "Yes," Penny said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." The ring fit perfectly, the emerald catching the firelight as Penny held out her hand to admire it. Cade rose and pulled her into his arms, holding her close while she cried happy tears against his shoulder. "I cannot believe this is real," Penny said when she finally pulled back to look at him. 2 years ago, I thought I would spend my whole life in Aunt Martha's boarding house, alone except for my animals. I never imagined I could be this happy." "Neither did I," Cade admitted. "I thought I was going to drift forever, never finding a place to belong." But then I saw you feeding those strays, saw your kindness and your beautiful heart, and I knew you were what I had been searching for all along." They spent the rest of the evening making detailed plans for the wedding, laughing and dreaming and holding each other close. When Cade finally walked back to the boarding house in the small hours of the morning, the stars were still bright overhead and his heart was full to bursting. The wedding was everything Penny had hoped for, small and intimate and full of genuine warmth. She wore a simple white dress that Martha had helped her make, with lace at the collar and sleeves that had belonged to Penny's mother. Cade wore his best suit, borrowed from Tom, who was roughly the same size, and stood at the front of the church with his heart in his throat as Penny walked down the aisle on Martha's arm. Reverend Walsh performed a beautiful ceremony, speaking about love and commitment, and the courage it took to build a life with another person. Cade spoke his vows in a clear, strong voice, promising to love and cherish Penny for all their days, to stand beside her through hardship and joy, to honor the woman she was and support the woman she would become. Penny's voice shook with emotion as she made her own vows, promising to love Cade with all her heart, to be his partner and his friend, to build a home and a family with him and face whatever the future brought with courage and faith. When Reverend Walsh pronounced them husband and wife, Cade kissed Penny with all the love and promise he felt, and the small congregation erupted in applause. Martha was crying openly, as were several of the ranch hands who had become Cade's friends. Even Tom had to wipe his eyes surreptitiously. The celebration afterward was held at the boarding house, with Martha providing a feast that seemed impossible for one woman to have prepared. There was roasted chicken and beef, fresh bread and 3 kinds of pie, and a beautiful cake that the baker in town had donated as a wedding gift. They danced in the boarding house dining room, with Harold the salesman playing fiddle, and everyone taking turns spinning Penny around until she was dizzy with laughter. As the sun set and the guests began to depart, Cade and Penny thanked each person individually, grateful for the community that had embraced them both. Martha pulled Cade aside before they left, her expression serious. "You take care of her," she said. "My Penny has the strongest heart of anyone I know, but that does not mean it cannot be broken. Love her well, Cade Brennan." "I will," Cade promised. "Every day for the rest of my life I will love her well." "Then go," Martha said, her voice softening. "Go home to your cabin and your new life. You have earned this happiness, both of you." Cade and Penny walked home under a sky full of stars, their arms around each other and their hearts full. The cabin was warm and welcoming when they arrived, a fire already laid in the hearth that Cade quickly lit. The animals were all settled in their shelter, Benjamin standing guard at the door, and everything felt perfectly, beautifully right. "Welcome home, Mrs. Brennan," Cade said, sweeping Penny up in his arms to carry her over the threshold. "Welcome home, Mr. Brennan," Penny replied, laughing as he set her down gently. "Now come here and kiss your wife properly." Cade was happy to oblige, and as he held Penny close in the firelight of their cabin, he sent up a silent prayer of thanks for the day he had stopped in Cimarron, for the moment he had seen her feeding stray animals, for the courage to stay when every instinct had told him to keep running. He had found so much more than he had ever dared hope for: a home, a purpose, and a love that would sustain him through all the years to come. The months after the wedding passed in a blur of work and joy. Spring came early that year, bringing warm rains that turned the New Mexico landscape green and lush. Penny planted a garden that flourished under her careful attention, producing vegetables in abundance that she shared generously with neighbors and used to supplement the animals' meals. Cade continued his work at the Baker Ranch, gaining a reputation as one of the best horsemen in the territory. By summer, Penny discovered she was pregnant, and Cade felt as if his heart might burst from happiness when she told him. They celebrated quietly, just the two of them and Martha, who cried and fussed and immediately began knitting tiny clothes. "A baby," Penny said wonderingly, her hand on her still flat stomach. "Our baby, Cade, can you believe it?" "I can," Cade said, pulling her close. "I can believe in anything now. You have taught me that miracles happen, that good things come to those who are brave enough to stay and build them." The pregnancy was not easy. Penny struggled with sickness in the early months, and by the time autumn arrived, she was tired and uncomfortable, her small frame struggling under the weight of the growing child. Cade worried constantly, hovering over her until she finally had to gently but firmly tell him to stop treating her like she was made of glass. "Women have been having babies since the dawn of time," she reminded him. "I am strong and I am healthy and I will be fine. You need to trust me and trust this process." "I do trust you," Cade said. "I just love you so much that the thought of anything happening to you terrifies me." "Nothing is going to happen to me," Penny said confidently. "This baby and I are both fighters, and we are both going to come through this just fine. You wait and see." She was right, though it did not make the labor any easier when her time finally came in late February. Martha and the town's midwife, a capable woman named Helen Murray, attended her while Cade paced the cabin floor, listening to Penny's labored breathing and occasional cries of pain and feeling utterly helpless. It was a long night, longer than any Cade had ever experienced. He prayed more in those hours than he had in his entire life. Bargaining with God and making promises he fully intended to keep if only Penny and the baby would be all right. Benjamin sat at his feet the whole time, as if offering silent support, and Cade was grateful for the dog's steady presence. Finally, as dawn was breaking over the mountains, he heard the thin, angry cry of a newborn baby. His heart stopped, then started again at double speed as Martha emerged from the bedroom, her face exhausted but smiling. "You have a son," she said. "A healthy, strong boy. And Penny is fine, tired but fine. She is asking for you." Cade rushed into the bedroom, his eyes going immediately to Penny. She was propped up against the pillows, her hair damp with sweat and her face pale, but she was smiling as she held a tiny, red-faced bundle against her chest. "Come meet your son," she said softly. Cade approached the bed as if in a dream, staring down at the impossibly small creature in his wife's arms. The baby had stopped crying and was making little snuffling sounds, his tiny fists waving aimlessly. He had dark hair like Cade's and what looked like it might be Penny's green eyes, though it was hard to tell. "He is perfect," Cade breathed. "Penny, he is absolutely perfect." "He is," Penny agreed. "Would you like to hold him?" Cade took the baby carefully, terrified he might break something, but the infant settled into his arms as if he belonged there. Cade felt tears sliding down his face as he looked at his son, this tiny person who was half him and half Penny, a living testament to their love. "We need to name him," Penny said. "I was thinking perhaps Charles after your father, Charles Brennan," Cade said, testing the name. "Charlie for short. I think my father would have liked that." "Then Charlie it is," Penny said. "Charlie Brennan, welcome to your family. We have been waiting for you." The weeks after Charlie's birth were exhausting but wonderful. The baby was healthy and grew quickly, though he had a set of lungs on him that Penny swore could wake the dead. Cade took time off from the ranch to help with the baby and the household duties, and Martha visited nearly every day, unable to resist the lure of her grandnephew. "He is going to be tall like you," Martha observed one afternoon, watching Cade walk the floor with Charlie draped over his shoulder. "And stubborn like his mother. You are going to have your hands full with this one." "I hope so," Cade said, gently patting the baby's back. "I want him to have all of Penny's best qualities, her kindness, her strength, her unwillingness to accept injustice when she sees it." "Those are good things to hope for in a child," Martha said. "But do not forget to let him be his own person too. He will surprise you, probably in ways you cannot even imagine yet." She was right, of course. As Charlie grew from infant to toddler to young child, he developed a personality entirely his own. He had his mother's tender heart, yes, but he also had a mischievous streak and a fearlessness that kept Penny and Cade constantly on their toes. He toddled after them as they fed the animals, insisting on helping even when his help consisted mostly of throwing food in random directions. The animals adored him, particularly Benjamin, who appointed himself as Charlie's personal guardian and could usually be found sleeping outside the boys' bedroom door. When Charlie was 2, Penny became pregnant again, and this time the pregnancy was easier. Their daughter, Clara, was born on a warm summer evening, sliding into the world with far less drama than her brother had. She had Penny's blonde hair and Cade's brown eyes, and from the moment she was born, she was a calm, observant baby who seemed to take in everything around her with serious contemplation. "She is going to be the smart one," Cade predicted, watching as baby Clara studied her own hands with intense concentration. "Charlie has the energy and the heart, but Clara is going to be the thinker." "They are both smart," Penny said loyally. "And they are both going to be whatever they choose to be. We are just going to love them and guide them and try not to mess them up too badly." "That seems like a reasonable parenting philosophy," Cade agreed, leaning over to kiss his wife. "How did I get so lucky, Penny Brennan?" "You stopped running," Penny said simply. "You saw what was important and you had the courage to stay and fight for it. That is not luck, Cade. That is choice, and you made the right one." As the years passed, the Brennan family continued to grow and thrive. Charlie and Clara were joined by another brother, Henry, and then a sister, Rose. The cabin was expanded several times to accommodate the growing family, until it bore little resemblance to the broken-down structure Cade had first purchased. The animal shelter grew as well, becoming a recognized institution in Cimarron, where people brought strays and injured creatures, knowing Penny would care for them. Cade never did take that job on the railroad in Colorado. Instead, he eventually bought into the Baker Ranch as a junior partner, his skill with horses and his steady, reliable nature making him invaluable to the operation. Tom retired after a few years, and Cade became the ranch foreman, a position of respect and responsibility that he handled with the same dedication he brought to everything else in his life. Martha continued to run the boarding house until her 70s, when she finally agreed to let Penny and Cade convert the top floor into an apartment for her and hire a manager to handle the day-to-day operations. She spent her remaining years surrounded by her great-nieces and great-nephews, watching with satisfaction as the family she had helped build flourished and grew. On the 20th anniversary of the day Cade had first seen Penny feeding stray animals in that alley behind the general store, they took a walk together to the spot where it had all begun. The town had changed and grown over the years, but the alley was still there, and so were the descendants of some of those first animals Penny had cared for. "You ever regret staying?" Penny asked, leaning against Cade's shoulder as they watched a new generation of strays being fed by one of their own children, Rose, who had inherited her mother's compassion for animals. "You ever wonder what your life would have been like if you had gone to Colorado instead?" "Not once," Cade said honestly. "Not for a single moment in 20 years have I regretted choosing you, choosing this life, choosing to stay. Everything good in my world came from that decision, Penny. You, our children, our home, our friends, all of it. I was lost before I found you, and you gave me a reason to stop wandering and start living. I was lost too, Penny said softly. I did not realize it at the time because I was so focused on surviving and caring for these animals. But I was lonely, Cade. I had Aunt Martha and my work and my purpose, but I did not have love, not the kind that sustains you and makes you want to build something lasting. You gave that to me. We gave it to each other, Cade corrected, pulling her close. That is how it works when it is right. It is not one person saving the other. It is two people choosing to face life together, supporting each other through the hard times and celebrating the good. They stood there in the fading afternoon light, watching their daughter feed animals just as Penny had done all those years ago. And Cade felt the circle of his life completing itself in the most beautiful way possible. He had been a lonely cowboy once, drifting and purposeless, until the day he saw a woman with a kind heart feeding strays in an alley. That moment had changed everything, had set him on a path that led to more love and happiness than he had ever dared imagine. I love you, Penny Brennan, he said, as he had said thousands of times before and would say thousands of times more. For now and forever, I love you. And I love you, Cade Brennan, Penny replied, her green eyes warm with affection and contentment. Always and completely I love you. As they walked home together, their hands intertwined and their hearts full, Cade knew with absolute certainty that he had made the right choice all those years ago. He had found his purpose, his home, and his heart's desire in the woman walking beside him, and he would spend the rest of his days being grateful for the moment he had been brave enough to stop running and start living. The years continued to roll by with the steady rhythm of a life well lived. Charlie grew into a young man with his father's height and his mother's compassionate nature, choosing to stay in Cimarron and work alongside Cade at the ranch. Clara, true to her father's prediction, became a teacher at the town schoolhouse, her calm intelligence and patient nature making her beloved by students and parents alike. Henry followed his own path, becoming an apprentice to the town veterinarian, and eventually taking over the practice when Mr. Shaw retired. And Rose, the youngest, continued her mother's work with the animals, expanding the shelter and establishing formal partnerships with other towns in the territory to help place strays in good homes. Martha lived to see all four of her great-nieces and great-nephews grown and established in their own lives, a satisfaction that she expressed often in her final years. She passed peacefully in her sleep one autumn night, with Penny holding her hand and Cade keeping vigil from the doorway. Her funeral was attended by half the town, a testament to the impact she had made during her decades in Cimarron. She was proud of you, Cade told Penny as they stood by Martha's grave after the service. She told me once that watching you build a life and a family was the greatest joy of her later years. I could not have done any of it without her, Penny said, tears streaming down her face. She took me in when I had nowhere else to go, gave me a home and a purpose and unconditional love. I owe her everything. She would say you owe her nothing, Cade replied gently. That love does not come with debts attached, but she would want you to honor her memory by continuing to live the life she helped you build, by being happy and fulfilled and true to your values. Then that is what I will do, Penny said, straightening her shoulders and wiping her eyes. That is what we will all do as a family. We will live well and love generously and take care of those who cannot care for themselves, just as she taught us. The inheritance Martha left was modest but meaningful. The boarding house, which Penny and Cade decided to transform into a permanent animal shelter and veterinary clinic, with Henry running the medical side and Rose managing the care and placement of the animals. It became known throughout the territory as a place where any creature, no matter how damaged or difficult, could find kindness and healing. As Cade and Penny entered their later years, they found themselves surrounded by the fruits of the life they had built together. Their children had all found their own paths but remained close, gathering regularly for Sunday dinners that grew increasingly crowded as grandchildren arrived. The first was Charlie's son, named Cade in honor of his grandfather, followed quickly by Clara's twin daughters and Henry's 3 boys. Rose, who had inherited her mother's independent spirit, chose not to marry but instead focused her considerable energy on the shelter, where she was both feared and revered for her exacting standards of animal care. "We did all right," Penny said one evening as they sat on the porch of their cabin, now expanded into a proper house, but still containing the original structure at its heart. They were watching the sunset paint the New Mexico sky in shades of orange and purple, a view they had shared thousands of times but which never seemed to lose its beauty. "Better than all right," Cade replied, taking her hand in his. The skin was more wrinkled now, marked by decades of hard work, but to him she was as beautiful as the day he had first seen her kneeling in the dust, feeding stray animals with the last of her supper. "We built something real, Penny, something lasting. Our children are good people doing good work, and their children will carry on that legacy. Not many people can say that." "It all started with you staying," Penny reminded him. "You could have ridden north to Colorado and we would never have seen each other again. But you stayed, and everything else followed from that choice." "I stayed because I saw something in you that I needed in my own life," Cade said. "Kindness, purpose, the courage to do what was right even when it was difficult. You were feeding those animals not because you would gain anything from it, but simply because they needed help and you had the ability to provide it. That selflessness, that fundamental goodness, it drew me like a moth to flame. I could not have left if I tried." "I am glad you did not try," Penny said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "These 40 years with you have been the greatest blessing of my life, Cade. Through all the hard times and the good, the losses and the celebrations, you have been my constant, my partner, my love, my home." They sat together in comfortable silence as the stars began to emerge one by one in the darkening sky. From the shelter came the sounds of animals settling for the night, a symphony of barks and meows and rustling straw that was as familiar as breathing. Benjamin had long since passed, as had most of those first animals Penny had cared for, but their legacy lived on in the generations that followed and in the institution that had grown from her simple acts of kindness. "You think we made a difference?" Penny asked suddenly. "In the grand scheme of things, do you think any of this mattered?" "Look around you," Cade said gently. "Look at our children and grandchildren, at the shelter that bears your name, at the hundreds of animals that have been saved and placed in loving homes. Look at the people in this town who learned from your example, who started treating animals with more kindness because they saw how much good it could do. Of course we made a difference, Penny. Of course it mattered. But there is still so much suffering in the world," Penny said. "Still so many animals being abandoned and mistreated, still so much cruelty and indifference." "And there always will be," Cade acknowledged. "We cannot save everyone, fix everything, but that does not make what we did save, what we did fix, any less important. You taught me that, remember? That first morning when I found you feeding the animals, and you said they deserved kindness simply because they were living creatures who needed help. You did not let the magnitude of the problem stop you from addressing the part of it you could reach." "I suppose you are right," Penny said. "I just want to know that it meant something, that the work we did will continue after we are gone." "It will," Cade assured her. Rose has already made plans to expand the shelter, and Henry is training 2 new veterinarians to help with the workload. Charlie and Clara both volunteer there regularly, teaching their own children the importance of compassion and responsibility. The ripples of what you started 40 years ago will continue spreading for generations, Penny. That is your legacy. As if to punctuate his words, they heard the sound of a wagon approaching, and soon Rose appeared with a crate in her arms. Even in the dimming light, they could hear the mewling of kittens. "Found these behind the church," Rose called out as she climbed down from the wagon. "Someone left them in a box, can you imagine? In this heat, they could have died, but do not worry, I will get them settled and fed and start looking for homes first thing tomorrow." "That is our girl," Penny said proudly as Rose disappeared into the shelter. "She has your stubbornness and my soft heart, a dangerous combination." "The best kind," Cade agreed. They remained on the porch long after Rose had finished her work and driven away, reluctant to end the peaceful evening. These quiet moments together had become more precious as the years passed, as they both felt time's inexorable march and treasured each day they were granted. "I want you to know something," Cade said as the night deepened around them. "If I could go back to that day 40 years ago, knowing everything that would happen, all the joys and sorrows and struggles, I would make the same choice. I would stay in Cimarron, court you properly under your aunt's watchful eye, marry you in that little church, and build this life with you. Every single time, Penny, I would choose you." "And I would choose you," Penny replied, her voice thick with emotion. "Every moment of happiness, every challenge we faced, every triumph and every loss, all of it was worth it because we faced it together." "You are the best choice I ever made, Cade Brennan. The very best." They kissed then, a gentle press of lips that held 40 years of love and commitment, and when they pulled apart, both had tears tracking down their weathered faces. "Come on," Cade said, standing and offering Penny his hand. "Let us go to bed, old woman. We have grandchildren coming for breakfast tomorrow, and you know they will arrive at dawn expecting pancakes." "I am not that old," Penny protested, but she took his hand and let him help her up, her joints protesting the movement more than they used to. "And neither are you, despite what your creaking knees might suggest." They walked into the house together, arms around each other's waists, moving through the familiar rooms they had lived in and loved in for so many years. The walls were covered with photographs now, chronicling the growth of their family and the passage of time. Cade paused to straighten one particular picture, taken on their 25th anniversary. The whole family gathered in front of the shelter, 3 generations of Brennans committed to the work Penny had started all those years ago. "We did good," he said again, more to himself than to Penny. "We did very good," Penny agreed. "Now come to bed before I fall asleep standing up." As they lay together in the darkness, Penny's head on Cade's shoulder and his arm wrapped protectively around her, both felt the deep contentment of a life well lived. The lonely cowboy who had been drifting aimlessly had found his purpose in a woman with a kind heart and a determination to make the world a little better, one stray animal at a time. And the young woman who had been surviving rather than living had found a partner who understood her, supported her, and loved her completely. "Good night, my love," Cade whispered. "Good night," Penny murmured, already half asleep. "See you in the morning." But she said it with such certainty, such confidence that they would indeed see each other in the morning and all the mornings after, that Cade felt his heart swell with renewed gratitude for the gift of her presence in his life. The years continued, as years do, bringing changes and challenges, but also joy and fulfillment. Cade and Penny celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary surrounded by their children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren. the youngest of whom was named Penelope in honor of her great-grandmother. The party was held at the shelter, which seemed appropriate, with decorations strung between the buildings and long tables laden with food that the entire town had contributed to. 50 years, Charlie said in his toast, raising his glass high. 50 years of love and partnership, of building something meaningful and lasting. My parents taught us all what it means to commit to something beyond yourself, to put the needs of others first, to live with integrity and compassion. Dad, Mom, thank you for the example you set and for the family you built. We love you. Hear, hear. The assembled crowd chorused, and Cade felt his eyes growing damp as he looked around at all these people, this community that had grown from his decision to stay in Cimarron all those decades ago. Penny squeezed his hand under the table. "Do not you dare cry," she whispered. "If you start, I will start, and then we will both be a mess." "Too late," Cade whispered back, not bothering to wipe away the tears on his cheeks. "I am already a mess, but I am a happy mess, so it does not count." "You are ridiculous," Penny said fondly. "And I love you more than words can say." The party lasted well into the evening, with music and dancing and storytelling that reminded everyone why they loved this family and this town. As the sun set and lanterns were lit to hold back the darkness, Cade found himself standing at the edge of the celebration, watching his family laugh and dance and simply be together. Rose appeared at his elbow, her own eyes suspiciously bright. "You are thinking deep thoughts, Dad," she observed. "Just remembering," Cade said. "Thinking about how different my life would have been if I had made different choices. If I had ridden past Cimarron instead of stopping, if I had gone to Colorado like I planned, if I had not had the courage to stay and fight for what I wanted." "But you did stay," Rose said. "You made the brave choice, and look at everything that came from it. You and Mom built this incredible legacy, Dad. Not just us kids and the grandkids, but the shelter, the veterinary clinic, the culture of compassion for animals that exists in this town now. You changed Cimarron for the better, both of you." "Your mother did that," Cade protested. "I just supported her." "You did more than support her," Rose said firmly. "You believed in her when not many people did. You helped her turn a simple act of kindness into an institution that has helped thousands of animals. You worked hard to provide for our family while also making sure Mom had the resources to pursue her calling. That is not just support, Dad. That is partnership, and it is rare and beautiful." Before Cade could respond, Penny appeared, slightly out of breath from dancing with her grandchildren. "There you are," she said, taking Cade's hand. "Come dance with me, old man. We should dance at our own anniversary party." "I am not much of a dancer," Cade protested, but he was already following her toward the makeshift dance floor. "You never were," Penny agreed, "but that never stopped us before." They danced slowly to the music, barely moving but holding each other close, and Cade thought about how far they had come from that first awkward conversation in the alley behind the general store. They had been strangers then, two lonely people looking for something they could not quite name. Now they were one, bound together by decades of shared experience and deep, abiding love. "Thank you," Cade said suddenly. "For what?" Penny asked, looking up at him with those green eyes that still took his breath away. "For being you," Cade said simply. "For having the kind of heart that could not walk past suffering without trying to help. For giving me a reason to stay, to build something, to become a better man than I was. For loving me, Penny. Thank you for loving me." "Oh, Cade," Penny said, her voice breaking. "You make it sound like I did you some great favor. But loving you has been the easiest, most natural thing I have ever done. You are a good man, a kind man, and being loved by you has been the greatest privilege of my life." They continued dancing long after the music changed, long after most of the guests had departed. until finally their children gently suggested it was time to go home and rest. The drive back to the house was quiet, both of them lost in thought, processing the love and celebration they had been immersed in all day. 50 years, Penny said as Cade helped her down from the wagon. Can you believe it has been that long? Yes and no, Cade replied. Some days it feels like we just got married yesterday. Other days it feels like I have loved you my entire life, like there was never a time before you. I know exactly what you mean, Penny said. Time is strange that way, compressing and expanding depending on how you are feeling. They prepared for bed with the easy familiarity of 50 years of shared routines. Penny brushing out her long silver hair while Cade changed into his nightshirt. The room was lit by a single lamp, casting gentle shadows on the walls, and through the open window came the soft sounds of the New Mexico night. As they settled into bed, Penny curled against Cade's side just as she had done thousands of nights before. Do you think we will know when it is our time? She asked quietly. When one of us has to leave the other? I do not know, Cade admitted, but I do know that whoever goes first, the other will be all right. We built a strong foundation, Penny. Our children will take care of us, and eventually we will be together again, on the other side of whatever comes next. I hope you are right, Penny said. I hate the idea of being separated from you, even temporarily. We will never truly be separated, Cade assured her. You are part of me now, woven into every cell and every thought. Even death cannot change that. They fell asleep holding each other, secure in the love they had built and the legacy they would leave behind. As it turned out, they did not have to face separation for several more years. Cade passed first, at the age of 78, his heart finally giving out after a lifetime of hard work and deep feeling. He died on a bright spring morning in his own bed with Penny holding his hand, surrounded by his children and grandchildren. His last words were, "I love you, Penny. Always and forever." Penny was devastated by the loss but not destroyed by it. She had known this day would come eventually, had prepared herself as much as anyone can prepare for losing their life partner. She mourned deeply, but also found comfort in the family they had built and the work they had done together. She lived another 3 years, continuing to oversee the shelter with Rose's help and spending as much time as possible with her expanding family. She told stories about Cade to the great-grandchildren who had never known him, keeping his memory alive through her words and her love. And every evening, she sat on the porch of the house they had built together, rocking slowly and talking to him as if he were still beside her. "I will see you soon," she would say, "but not quite yet. There is still work to be done here, still animals that need caring for, still grandchildren who need their grandmother. But soon, my love, soon." When Penny finally passed, peacefully in her sleep on a warm summer night, the entire town of Cimarron mourned. Her funeral was the largest anyone could remember, with people coming from all over the territory to pay their respects to the woman who had dedicated her life to kindness and compassion. She was buried next to Cade, in the cemetery on the hill overlooking the town, and on their shared headstone was inscribed a simple epitaph. They loved generously and lived fully, leaving the world better than they found it. The shelter continued to operate under Rose's leadership, and then under her nieces and nephews, and eventually under generations of Brennans who understood that their family's legacy was one of compassion and service. The story of how it all began, with a lonely cowboy seeing a young woman feed stray animals and falling in love with her kind heart, became part of Cimarron's history, told and retold until it took on the quality of legend. But for those who had known Cade and Penny personally, it was never just a story. It was a testament to the power of choosing love over loneliness, of staying instead of running, of building something meaningful with another person, and trusting that the work would endure long after you were gone. In the end, that was the true legacy of Cade and Penny Brennan. Not just the shelter or the family or even the culture of kindness they had helped create in Cimarron, but the simple, profound truth that one person's choice to act with compassion can ripple outward in ways beyond imagining, touching lives and changing hearts for generations to come. And somewhere, in whatever comes after this life, two souls who had loved each other for over 50 years were reunited, whole and together once more, ready to continue their journey side by side for all eternity.